I always thought that if my life ever fell apart, it would happen quietly, like the slow peeling of paint on an old window frame, imperceptible until suddenly everything looked different. But the truth is that it wasn't my own life that began to crack first. It was hers. And I saw every fracture long before she ever admitted something was breaking. Jody Montgomery has been my best friend for 15 years, which is long enough to memorize every version of her smile, from the dazzling, mischievous grin she used to wear in college, to the softer, tired one she wore after long shifts at the law firm, to the brittle one she saved for dinner parties with her husband. But 5 years into her marriage, her smile barely appeared at all. There were signs, subtle at first. Text messages answered hours later, canceled brunch dates, a strange hesitation in her voice when I asked how she was. Then bigger signs. The day she cried in her car in my driveway because Daniel forgot their anniversary. The night she showed up at my apartment with mascara smeared under her eyes and said she didn't remember the last time she felt like herself. And every time she unraveled just a little more, I stitched her back together quietly, carefully, the way I always had. Because she was Jody, my Jody, the girl who stormed into my dorm room during freshman orientation and announced she was adopting me because I looked like I needed a friend. The girl who dragged me to my first Pride event, even though she swore up and down she was straight. The girl whose hand I held when her mother had surgery. The girl who danced barefoot in my living room at 2 in the morning the night I got my first art gallery showing. So when she asked if she could come over one Friday night to escape just one more suffocating dinner with Daniel, I didn't even hesitate. I picked up her favorite wine, ordered takeout, cued our old college movie playlist, and cleaned the couch like she was a guest, even though she'd spent half her life here. When she arrived, she looked like someone who had been holding her breath for years. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, her wedding ring loose on her finger, her expression carrying something between exhaustion and relief. God, she said as soon as I opened the door, falling into my arms like gravity itself had decided this was where she belonged. I needed this. I needed you. I didn't let myself think too hard about the way my chest tightened hearing that. I never allowed myself to think too hard about anything when it came to her. We settled on the couch like old times, playing the stupid drinking game we invented at 19, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny, letting the familiarity of it all wrap around us like a blanket. She kept pouring wine. I kept pretending I didn't notice how much she was drinking. And for the first time in a long time, she looked happy, truly happy, carefree in a way she hadn't been since before her wedding. She stretched her legs across my lap without thinking, just like she used to. Her fingers brushed my wrist when she reached for the bottle, lingering a bit too long. Her eyes softened when she looked at me, like she was seeing something she hadn't allowed herself to look at before. Do you ever feel, she said suddenly, somewhere between tipsy and heartbroken, like you built a life you don't recognize? I swallowed. Sometimes. She turned toward me fully, her knees brushing my thigh, her voice dropping into something fragile. I'm so tired of pretending everything's fine. Her vulnerability cracked something inside me. I wanted to hold her face in my hands, tell her she didn't have to pretend with me, tell her she could fall apart, and I would always be the one to catch her. But I didn't move. I never moved first with her. I never allowed myself the fantasy. She lowered her gaze, twisting her ring around her finger. Do you ever regret? She paused, searching for the words. Do you ever regret not telling someone how you felt, even if it scared you? My heartbeat stumbled. I didn't know if she was talking about marriage or about something else entirely, something terrifyingly close to the truth I carried for years. Yeah, I whispered. I do. We fell silent, the only sound the low hum of the projector and the rain beginning to tap against the windows. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin, her fingers curling lightly around my arm. It was innocent, maybe, familiar, but it felt different, heavier, charged. I could feel her heartbeat through the thin fabric of her shirt. And then, without warning, she lifted her head, looked at me with eyes full of something raw and unguarded, and whispered, Emma, I don't know who I am anymore. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but she didn't give me the chance. She closed the distance between us and kissed me. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't the experimental mistake of a woman who drank too much wine and got confused. It was desperate, urgent, like she had been holding it inside her for years and finally cracked open under the weight of it. Her hands cupped my face. Mine froze midair. Her lips moved against mine like she knew exactly what she was doing. When she pulled back, her eyes were already filling with tears, her voice breaking apart in her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I don't know who I am, Emma. I never knew." And before I could say a single word, she stood up, grabbed her jacket with trembling hands, and walked out my door into the rain, leaving me breathless, stunned, and with 15 years of unspoken love cracking open inside my chest. I spent the next 7 days replaying that kiss so many times that I began to lose track of what was memory and what was imagination. It looped through my mind at night when I tried to sleep, haunting the space between dreams and waking. It flickered behind my eyelids when I showered, when I worked, when I pretended to focus on anything else. The way her breath hitched, the way her hands trembled against my cheeks, the soft gasp she made when she finally pulled away. I kept telling myself I had hallucinated the whole thing, that maybe she tripped or leaned too close or intended to kiss my cheek and missed. But my mind kept insisting. No, Emma, she kissed you like someone who has been starving for years. And yet she vanished. Not a single text. Not a single call. Not even the usual string of emojis Jody sent whenever she felt guilty about ignoring me. Every hour that passed in silence felt like a thread snapping inside my chest. By the third day, I convinced myself she regretted everything, not just the kiss, but the friendship, the honesty, the vulnerability. By the fifth day, I started imagining scenarios where she told Daniel everything, and he forbade her from seeing me, or where she convinced herself that kissing a woman was just the symptom of some emotional breakdown she wanted to erase. By the sixth day, I hated myself for wanting her to explain the kiss when she was clearly drowning in something much bigger than me. On the seventh day, at 8:14 in the morning, the doorbell rang. My heart shot up into my throat so violently, I thought I might choke on it. I opened the door expecting her to look messy, ashamed, hungover from the emotional crash of what happened. But what I found instead made my stomach drop. Jody stood on my doorstep wearing clean clothes, her hair tied back neatly, no makeup, no ring. Her wedding ring, always present, always gleaming, always a symbol of the life she built, was gone. Completely gone. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed, exhausted, but underneath that exhaustion was something sharper. Resolve. She whispered, though her voice sounded scraped raw. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, still stunned, still trying to breathe normally as she walked past me into the living room like she wasn't shattering the floor beneath my feet. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the couch where she'd kissed me. She swallowed hard. I asked Daniel for a divorce. I felt the words hit me physically, like she had reached inside my chest and pulled something out. "What?" She lifted her chin slightly, though her voice wavered. "I asked him for a divorce. 2 days ago. 2 days ago. While I was going crazy imagining all the ways she was avoiding me, she was blowing up her entire life." "Jody," I murmured, stepping toward her slowly, cautiously, as if she might shatter if I moved too fast. "What happened?" She let out a hollow laugh. "What didn't happen?" She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "The morning after I left here, I woke up in the guest room because Daniel and I hadn't slept in the same bed in months. He asked me what was wrong, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't lie." She lifted her head, tears gathering at the edges of her lashes. "I told him I wasn't happy, that I wasn't myself, that our marriage wasn't working anymore." Her breath trembled, and he asked me if there was someone else. My blood went cold. "What did you say?" She dragged in a shaking breath. I said no, because I didn't even know what the kiss meant. I didn't know anything yet. I still don't. She started pacing then, restless, overwhelmed, like the walls were pressing in around her. He was furious. Said I blindsided him. Said I owed it to him to try harder. Said divorce wasn't an option. She blinked back tears. But it is. For me. I can't keep pretending, Emma. I can't keep living a life that isn't mine. She looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes full of sorrow and determination all tangled together. So I told him I wanted out. And I left. My mouth felt dry. Left how? I packed a bag. Drove to a hotel. Called a lawyer. She shrugged hopelessly. He's already fighting it, of course. Said he'll drag this out. Said I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe I am. Her voice cracked. But staying would be worse. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to pull her into my arms and let her fall apart against me, but I didn't know if touching her now would comfort her or complicate everything further. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked gently. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Because I didn't know how. Because I didn't want you to think I was doing this because of what happened. There it was, the unspoken storm between us. The kiss. The moment that cracked open 15 years of friendship and poured something dangerous into the space between us. I sat beside her, careful not to touch her. Jody, I said softly, steadying my voice, I don't think you're doing this because of the kiss. She pressed her lips together to keep them from trembling. You should, she whispered, because I haven't stopped thinking about it. My breath stilled. The room felt smaller, warmer, heavier. Jody, I know, she said quickly, shaking her head as if trying to outrun the thought. I know it's too much. I know it's unfair. I know you didn't ask for any of this. She inhaled unsteadily. But that night, I felt something. Something I've spent a decade pretending I didn't feel. My heart thudded violently in my chest. You don't have to define anything right now, I said carefully. You're in the middle of something huge. You're hurting. You're confused. You're trying to rebuild your entire life. We don't have to talk about the kiss. Her eyes filled again. But it happened. I know. And I meant it. The world seemed to tilt. She meant it. She wasn't drunk and confused. She wasn't experimenting. She meant it. But before I could respond, before I could even breathe the air around us, she looked away and wiped her face with the back of her hand. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not. I needed you to know. She stared down at her hands. I don't know who I am yet. And I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to make you some rebound or some confused chapter in the middle of my divorce. You deserve better than that. Better than me right now. A slow ache spread through my chest. I don't need you to be anything for me right now, I whispered. I just need you to not disappear again. She exhaled shakily. I won't. I promise. She reached for my hand then, hesitant, gentle, her fingers barely brushing mine like she wasn't sure she had the right to touch me anymore. And maybe she didn't. But I didn't pull away. Because I had loved her long before I admitted it to myself, and now that the truth was finally cracking through the surface, I wasn't sure I could ever let go again. She squeezed my hand lightly, fragile and grateful. Can I stay here for a while? She asked, her voice trembling. Just until the lawyers start sorting things out? My heart clenched painfully. I knew letting her stay would destroy any illusion of emotional distance I was trying to keep. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. I knew it would make everything more complicated, more intense, more impossible to ignore. But I also knew I couldn't let her face this alone. Yes, I said, softly but firmly. You can stay. Her relief was immediate, heartbreaking. She leaned into me, not kissing me, not crossing any line, just resting her head on my shoulder like she used to, like she belonged there, like she had never left. And I knew then, with terrifying clarity, that nothing about this was simple. Nothing about this was temporary. Whatever was happening between us, it was only beginning. Having Jody in my apartment again felt like stepping into an alternate version of my life, one where the woman I'd loved in silence for years moved through my space with bare feet and soft apologies, where her toothbrush sat beside mine, where her jacket hung on the back of my dining chair because she didn't know yet which drawer to claim. But there was nothing romantic about the way she arrived. A single suitcase, a look of exhaustion so deep it seemed carved into her bones, and a quiet tremor in her voice that never fully went away. She slept on my couch that first night, insisting she didn't want to invade my room, though we both knew she had slept beside me countless times in college, sharing one pillow and complaining about how small my mattress was. But this was different. Everything was different. The unspoken tension between us hovered like a ghost in a room. I left her blankets and water and turned off the lights, trying not to stare at the shadow of her body curled under the throw blanket, her breathing uneven, restless. I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the sound of rain outside and the occasional soft whimper from the living room, Jody trying and failing not to cry. At sunrise, I found her in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinets, knees pulled to her chest, mug untouched beside her. She looked so small, so breakable, a version of her I had never seen before. "Jody," I whispered. She wiped her cheeks quickly, but not quickly enough. "Sorry," she muttered. I woke up anxious. "Didn't want to wake you." "You could've," I said softly. "You can." She shook her head like she didn't believe she deserved that kind of softness. "Everything is happening so fast," she breathed. "I asked for the divorce. I left the house. I'm here. And Daniel keeps calling. Angry, begging, accusing, sometimes all in the same minute." She pressed her hands over her face. "I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing, Em." I crouched beside her, my voice quiet but steady. "You're choosing yourself. That's the right thing." She looked at me with wet, terrified eyes. "But what if I don't know who that is?" There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, but none felt safe. None felt fair. So instead, I just rested my hand near hers, not touching, just close enough that she could reach if she wanted to. After a long moment, she did. Her fingers hooked around mine weakly, gratefully. Days passed like that, slowly, painfully, filled with moments that felt too intimate and too fragile to handle. She helped me cook dinner, standing so close behind me that her breath warmed the back of my neck. She borrowed my sweaters, sleeves hanging long past her hands. She followed me around the apartment like a shadow, not clingy, but quietly terrified of being alone with her own thoughts. Every night, she slept on the couch, though I sometimes woke to the sound of her whispering into her phone in the dark, arguing with Daniel or her parents, or maybe with the version of herself she had been trying to keep alive for too long. And every morning, she looked at me with a new kind of weariness, like I was the only stable thing in a world that had suddenly spun out of control. Tension built in small ways. The graze of her fingers when she handed me a glass. The way she lingered in doorways, like she was waiting for permission to enter my space. The long moments where we accidentally caught each other's eyes and looked away too quickly. And always, underneath everything, the ghost of that kiss. One evening, 3 days after she moved in, she came into my art studio while I was painting. Jody never entered my studio unless invited. It was my sanctuary, my chaos, my place to disappear. But this time she stood in the doorway, hesitant but determined. "I needed to be near someone," she said softly. "Is that okay?" "Of course," I said, though my heartbeat sounded like a drum in my ears. She stepped inside, admiring the half-finished canvas, blue strokes, gold flecks, sharp angles that had started as an abstract representation of longing but now looked suspiciously like the shape of a woman curling into herself. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Sad, but beautiful." She sat on the floor beside me, her arm brushing mine, her presence warm and painfully close. "Is that how you've been feeling?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. "Sometimes." She nodded as though she already knew. Then, after a long silence, she whispered, "Can I ask you something personal?" My chest tightened. "You can ask me anything." She swallowed. Have you ever been in love with someone who didn't know? Someone you couldn't tell? The breath left my body. My hands froze on the paintbrush. Yes, I managed, barely audible. What did it feel like? Like wanting to breathe underwater. I said. Impossible. Necessary. Painful. She stared at me with something that looked dangerously close to recognition. Before I could process that look, her phone rang loudly. Daniel. Again. She recoiled like she had been slapped. I can't, she whispered, rejecting the call. It rang again. And again. Her breathing hitched. Her hands shook. I stood quickly, helping her to her feet, guiding her away from the sound as her tears began to fall. Hey, I murmured. It's okay. You don't have to talk to him right now. He won't stop, she sobbed. He keeps saying I'm ruining everything, that I'm throwing away our life, that I'm confused, that I'll regret this. She grabbed my wrists, desperate. What if he's right, Emma? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Do you want to go back? She froze. Completely. Then she whispered, No, then he's not right. She leaned into me, trembling, her forehead against my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around her slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she clung to me, fists tight in my shirt, crying in a way that broke something deep inside me. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I don't know what happens next. We'll figure it out one step at a time. She pulled back slightly, her face inches from mine, her breath unsteady. Her eyes flicked to my lips for a fraction of a second too real, a second too dangerous. It would have happened. I know it would have happened. Another kiss, another collapse of the boundary between us, if her phone hadn't buzzed with a new message. She stiffened. I felt her entire body change. She stepped back, wiping her face quickly, grabbing her phone with trembling hands. It's Daniel again, she whispered. He says he's coming here. What? He says he's outside. Panic flashed to her eyes, a different kind of fear, sharp and immediate. I rushed to the window. A black car idled across the street. The silhouette inside was unmistakable. He can't come in, she said suddenly. Emma, he can't see me here. He'll twist everything. He'll say I ran to you. He'll say this is an affair. Her voice cracked. Please. Please don't let him in. I swallowed my fear and nodded. Stay in the bedroom. I'll handle it. The knock came seconds later, hard, impatient, echoing through the walls. And behind me, I felt Jody's hand slip into mine, warm and trembling, as she whispered, I'm not ready for him to know the truth. I'm not ready for the world to know anything. Please, Emma, protect me. I squeezed her hand back, my heartbeat thundering. I will. Then I walked toward the door, toward the man she once loved, toward the life she was trying to escape, toward the storm that was about to crash through everything we thought we understood. When I opened the door, I expected Daniel to look furious or disheveled, or at least unsettled by the chaos brewing between him and his wife. But no, Daniel Montgomery stood there like a man posing for a magazine cover. Perfectly pressed suit, impeccably knotted tie, hair combed back with clinical precision. The kind of man who believed he could control any room by simply walking into it. He offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emma, he said smoothly, as if this were a casual visit and not the aftermath of his marriage collapsing. Long time. My grip on the door tightened. Daniel. He glanced past me into the apartment, scanning every corner he could see, his jaw ticking once. Mind if I come in? Actually, I do. His smile faltered for half a second, replaced by annoyance. I'm here for my wife. I force myself to keep my voice level. She isn't ready to talk. His eyes sharpened, cold, and evaluating. She's here then. It wasn't a question. Where else would she run? My pulse spiked, but I didn't move, didn't open the door any wider. She needs space. She's confused, he said, waving a dismissive hand. We've been married for 5 years. Couples fight. Couples struggle. That doesn't mean she gets to run off, and he stopped abruptly, narrowing his gaze at me. What exactly is she doing here? Before I could answer, he leaned in slightly, his voice lowering into something far more dangerous. This isn't her. This impulse, this drama. She doesn't think like this. I felt anger flare in my chest, hot, sharp, protective. Maybe you don't know her as well as you think. His nostrils flared. I know my wife. Do you? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened, but before he could retort, we both heard it, the faint creak of the bedroom door shifting open. Daniel's eyes snapped past me. Jody. The air thickened. My stomach dropped. She must have moved without realizing the sound would carry. Footsteps approached, slow and hesitant. And then Jody appeared at the end of the hallway, wearing one of my oversized sweaters, looking pale, exhausted, caught between fear and resolve. Daniel's face went rigid, as if he'd been slapped. You're staying here, he said flatly. Jody swallowed. I needed time. Time, he echoed incredulously. You needed time? Or you needed her? His glare flicked toward me like a knife. Don't do that, Jody whispered, but her voice shook. Don't twist this. He stepped inside without permission, brushing past me, his attention locked entirely on her. You blindsided me. You blindsided our families. Do you realize how insane this looks? You walk out, you move in with someone else, you refuse to talk to me. How does that make you look? Like someone who couldn't breathe anymore, she said quietly. For a moment, he froze, eyes flickering with something unreadable, hurt, maybe, or disbelief. Is there someone else? He asked, but the question wasn't confusion, it was accusation. Punishment. His jaw clenched. Are you in love with someone else? Jody's eyes darted to me. A flash, regret, fear, longing, too quick to hide. Daniel saw it. Oh God, he saw it. You're kidding me, he breathed, stepping back as if physically struck. Her? You left me for her? No. Jody cried, voice cracking. This isn't about Emma. He scoffed, venomous. Everything is about Emma. It always has been. Don't think I didn't notice how you talked about her, how you defended her, how you practically lit up whenever she walked into a room. She flinched. I felt nausea twist inside me. Daniel took another step toward her, cornering her with words sharper than any knife. You said you were confused. You said you didn't know who you were. He lowered his voice. Was that code for, I've been lying to myself and my husband for years? Jody's breath shook. Stop. Are you gay now? He demanded. Is that what this is? Daniel, I said sharply, stepping forward. That's enough. He ignored me. Or is this some midlife identity crisis you're dragging everyone into? Stop it. Jody's voice cracked like glass. You don't get to define me. Daniel looked stunned for a split second, maybe because it was the first time she'd ever yelled at him. She took a shaky breath, wiping her tears angrily. I didn't leave because of Emma. I left because I was disappearing. Because nothing in my life felt like mine anymore. Because I've been pretending for so long, I don't even recognize myself. Daniel shook his head, furious and wounded. We could have fixed this. We could have fought for us. We did, she whispered. For 5 years, I fought. Alone. He blinked, taken aback. She continued, voice trembling but resolute. You didn't see me, Daniel. You saw the version of me you wanted. The wife who smiled and agreed and made everything easy. The wife who didn't make mistakes or ask for anything or take up space. Her shoulders collapsed a little. I can't be her anymore. Silence swallowed the room. Heavy. Final. Daniel's expression hardened, turning cold and businesslike. The version of him I had always disliked most. If you go through with this divorce, he said quietly, I will not make it easy. You know that. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she nodded. I know. He stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then his gaze moved to me. Something ugly flashed in his eyes. Blame, jealousy, betrayal, all tangled together. This isn't over. And then he walked out. No goodbye, no final attempt, just the slam of the door echoing through the apartment. The moment he left, Jody collapsed into the nearest chair, shaking violently, covering her face with her hands. "Oh God," she whispered, over and over. "Oh God, what did I do? What did I just do?" I knelt in front of her, placing my hands gently over hers. "You told the truth," I said softly. "You finally told the truth." She looked at me then, eyes devastated, lost, searching for something she didn't know how to name. "He hates me," she whispered. "He doesn't understand." "He doesn't have to," I said gently. "Not anymore." Her voice broke. "And he thinks I left him for you." My breath faltered. "I know. And I didn't." She said it quickly, desperately, then hesitated. "But I don't know if that's entirely true either." My heartbeat skipped. "Jody, I'm not ready," she whispered. "I don't know what everything means yet. I don't know how to be someone new. I don't even know how to be honest with myself." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But I'm not confused about one thing. I feel safe with you. I always have." The words hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe. This wasn't a love confession. This wasn't a declaration. This was something raw, fragile, unfinished. Something dangerous. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against mine, her breath shaky and warm. "Just don't let go of me yet," she whispered. I closed my eyes, my hand lifting slowly to her cheek, the smallest touch possible, enough to steady her, not enough to push us over the edge of something neither of us could survive right now. "I'm not going anywhere," I murmured. And as she melted into me, trembling in the quiet aftermath of confrontation, I knew this storm was only beginning. But I also knew, deep in the place where secrets lived, that we had just crossed a line neither of us would ever be able to uncross. The days after Daniel's visit felt like walking through a minefield, quiet, tense, unpredictable, every small sound or shift in mood capable of detonating something hidden beneath the surface. Jody tried to act normal at first, insisting she didn't want to burden me with her emotions, which would have been funny if it weren't so sad, because her emotions were everywhere, woven into the air of the apartment like threads pulled loose from her life. She woke up from nightmares more often than she slept through the night, sometimes gasping for breath, sometimes whispering apologies into the darkness. She flinched every time her phone vibrated, even when it was just spam. She apologized constantly for taking space, for crying, for needing help, for not knowing what she needed. And in the middle of all that, she tried desperately to help with everything, as if folding laundry or washing dishes could make up for the emotional storm she brought into my home. But it wasn't her presence that troubled me. It was what I saw happening to her. The Jody I had known, the firecracker, the sunbeam, the walking chaos with the golden heart, was unraveling thread by thread. She'd always been strong, yes, but her strength had been the quiet kind, the supportive kind, the kind people took advantage of until she had nothing left for herself. Now the truth of that strength was cracking open, painful and exposed. One morning, 3 days after Daniel's confrontation, I found her staring blankly at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, unmoving. "You okay?" I asked gently. She blinked.
"Once. Twice."
"I don't recognize her," she murmured, eyes locked on her own face. "This woman. I don't know her." I stepped closer, but not too close. "She's just someone who's been through too much."
"She'll change."
"She'll grow." "Into what?" she whispered. "Someone I can live with," I said softly. "Someone you can love?" The question hit me like a punch. She met my eyes in the mirror, raw, frightened, searching. "Jody," I said slowly, "I don't want you to worry about labels or endings or anything right now. I want you to focus on surviving this." She turned toward me fully, shoulders shaking. "But I don't want you to think I'm using you to get through it. I don't want you to think I'm clinging to you, because I'm scared." "You're scared," I thought. But that didn't make her feelings any less real. Or any less dangerous. The moment broke when her phone rang, her sister this time. The conversation was brief, but brutal. "What are you doing?" her sister demanded. "Leaving your husband? Living with Emma? Are you trying to ruin your life?" "I'm trying to save it," Jody whispered, but her sister didn't hear her. Or didn't care. After the call, she paced the apartment, trembling, pulling at the sleeves of her sweater until I gently took her hands to keep her from hurting herself. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," she said. "Everyone thinks I'm destroying everything." "You're not," I said softly. "You're rebuilding." She shook her head, tears forming. "I don't know how." "Then let me help you." She looked at me, eyes softening, breath catching, that dangerous warmth rising between us again. But before either of us could cross it, her phone buzzed again, this time a text message from an unknown number. She frowned and opened it. Then her face went white. "Jody." I stepped closer. "What is it?" She handed me the phone with trembling fingers. The message read, "You left your husband for your little lesbian best friend. Everyone knows. Hope she's worth it." Attached was a photo. My blood ran cold. It was a picture of Jody leaving my apartment building earlier that morning, hair in a messy bun, wearing my hoodie, looking painfully fragile. The angle was unmistakably from across the street. Someone was watching. Someone was following her. Someone knew where she was. And someone was spreading it. "Oh my God," Jody whispered, clutching her own arms. "Oh my God, oh my God. Who sent this?" I demanded. "I don't know," she choked out. "Maybe one of Daniel's colleagues? My sister? One of his friends? Someone in my parents' group chat? I don't know." Her breathing quickened, spiraling into panic. I grabbed her gently by the shoulders. Hey, look at me."
Breathe.
Jody breathed. She was already shaking violently, tears spilling over, the beginnings of a panic attack I had never seen from her before. "They think I'm cheating," she cried. They think I'm leaving him for." She couldn't even finish the sentence. I pulled her into my arms instinctively, holding her against me, feeling her heartbeat racing against my chest. "You didn't cheat," I whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong." "They'll ruin me," she sobbed. "They'll destroy my reputation.
My job.
My family. Everything." That was the moment I realized something terrifying. The divorce wasn't going to be quiet. It wasn't going to be clean. And it wasn't going to be fair. Daniel wasn't fighting just emotionally. He was fighting strategically. And someone was helping him. "I won't let anything happen to you," I said fiercely, holding her tighter. "I promise." She buried her face into my neck. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I don't want them to drag you into this." "Too late," I whispered softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I'm already here." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her hands still gripping my shirt. Something shifted in her expression, a new kind of fear, deeper and more fragile than before. "Emma," she whispered, "I'm afraid this is going to break me. Then I'll hold you together." "What if I break you too?" "You won't." She swallowed hard, gaze falling to my lips for one suspended second. One heartbeat. One breath. "I don't trust myself," she whispered. "Then trust me," I said. She closed her eyes, breathing shakily, fighting something inside herself. "I'm not ready," she murmured. "I know. But I want to be near you." "Then stay near me." She exhaled, trembling, leaned her forehead against mine, let her hands slide from my shirt down to my wrists, holding on. Not kissing me, not yet. But the space between us was thinner than paper. A whisper. A possibility. A dangerous truth neither of us dared speak. Then another message came. This one from Daniel. "You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows you're with her. Hope she takes care of you the way I did." Jody stared at the words, her face crumpling in devastation and rage. "He's going to drag you into this," she whispered. "He's going to make this your fault. He's going to make me hate myself." "No," I said firmly. "He's going to fail." But even as I said it, even as she curled into me again seeking safety, I felt it. This was the beginning of something much darker.
Someone had seen her with me.
Someone had taken photos. Someone was spreading rumors. And whoever it was, they weren't finished. Not even close. I should have known something was wrong the moment Jody went quiet. Truly quiet. Not the trembling silence of panic, Not the exhausted silence of someone barely holding herself together, but a strange, distant stillness that settled over her like fog. It started the morning after the photo leaked. She barely touched her breakfast. She kept zoning out mid-conversation. She flinched when her phone buzzed but didn't check it. And more than once, I caught her resting a hand on her stomach, almost unconsciously, before quickly pulling it away like she was hiding something from herself. I tried not to push. God knows she had enough to deal with. But by the third day, the silence was suffocating. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, shoulders curled inward, staring at nothing. The light from the window washed over her in a way that made her look translucent, like she might vanish if someone blinked too hard. "Jody," I said softly, taking a seat beside her. "Talk to me." She didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even blink. Fear slowly crawled up the back of my neck. "Please," I whispered. "You're scaring me." Her breath hitched once, a soft, broken sound, and she finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, swollen, but empty in a way I had never seen. Even during the fight with Daniel, even during her worst panic, this was deeper. This was something she didn't know how to survive. "Emma," she said, her voice barely a thread. "I don't know how to tell you this." My heart stopped. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling against her knees. "Jody," I murmured, reaching toward her slowly. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Together." She inhaled sharply, then pressed both hands to her stomach again, this time deliberately. My chest tightened in dread. "No," I whispered. She nodded, tears welling, her voice cracking open. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world stopped spinning. The air thinned. My heartbeat turned into a dull, painful throb. Pregnant. Pregnant with Daniel's child. 3 months, judging by her trembling whisper a second later. 3 months. Which meant she had already been pregnant during that night on my couch, during the kiss, during the entire collapse of her marriage. 1,000 emotions slammed into me at once. Shock, fear, heartbreak, guilt. But the look on her face shattered me completely. She wasn't joyful. She wasn't hopeful. She was terrified, devastated, broken. "Jody," I whispered, barely breathing. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "Because I didn't want it to be true. Because I didn't want this to be happening. Because I can't bring a baby into this. I can't even hold myself together." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "How long have you known?" 2 days, she whispered. "I took the test at the pharmacy by your building. I had this feeling, and I couldn't ignore it anymore." "And the ultrasound?" I asked gently. She nodded miserably. "It's real, Emma. I'm really pregnant. 3 months." I sat back, unable to fully absorb the weight of it. A baby. Daniel's baby. Does he know? "No," she said quickly, panic rising in her voice. "No, and he can't, not yet. If he knows, he'll use it against me. He'll try to control everything. He'll make it impossible for me to leave. And my family, God, they won't support me. They'll say I ruined the kid's life before it was even born." She choked on the words, pressing her hands to her face. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to go through a divorce while pregnant.
I don't know who I am.
I don't know what this means."
I don't know anything.
I moved closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching someone standing at the edge of a cliff. "Jody," I whispered, "whatever you choose, I'm here. You're not alone." But she pulled away
From me.
from my voice, from my touch, from everything. "Stop saying that," she gasped through tears. "Stop acting like you can fix this. You can't fix this. You can't make this okay." Her words cut deep, but I didn't move. "I don't think I can fix it," I said softly. "But I don't want you to face it alone." She shook her head violently. "Emma, if I stay here, I'm dragging you into a disaster you didn't ask for. A scandal, a custody battle, a child that isn't yours, a future that isn't yours." She looked broken. You deserve someone who isn't a walking catastrophe. Something inside me cracked. Don't say that, I whispered, voice trembling. Don't push me away because you're scared. I'm not scared, she snapped, then corrected herself. Okay, I'm terrified.
But not just of the baby.
I'm terrified of what you feel for me, what I feel for you, what this will become if I don't create distance before it's too late. My breath caught painfully. Too late for what? Her eyes met mine, raw, vulnerable, full of a truth she wasn't ready to say out loud. Too late for me to fall in love with you while I'm carrying someone else's child. Silence fell between us, heavy, shattering, merciless. My heart caved in on itself. Not because she said she might fall for me, but because she believed she couldn't. Jody, I whispered, love doesn't work like that. But my life does, she said softly. It always has. She looked at the ring-shaped indentation still faintly visible on her finger, then at the floor. Emma, you deserve better than being second in a story you didn't choose. I felt heat behind my eyes, my breath shaking. Don't make decisions for me. Somebody has to, she whispered. Because I can't breathe. I can't think. My body is changing. My life is collapsing. And I kissed you. I kissed you like I'd been waiting for it forever. And now I'm pregnant with the man I'm divorcing. And I don't know what any of this means. She whispered the last part with such anguish that my chest physically hurt. I feel like I'm hurting you just by existing near you. You're not, I insisted. But she was already spiraling. I should leave. No, I said instantly, panic jolting through me. Don't do that. I don't want to lose you, she said through tears. But I'm afraid I'll ruin you. You won't. Emma, she collapsed into sobs, her whole body trembling as she covered her mouth with her hands, muffling the sound. I pulled her toward me gently, holding her as she cried into my shoulder. Messy, desperate, heartbroken sobs that soaked through my shirt and carved themselves into my skin. She clung to me like I was the last solid thing in her world, murmuring, I'm sorry, over and over until the words dissolved into breathless quiet. When she finally pulled back, her voice was hoarse, exhausted. I don't want to go through this alone, she whispered, but I'm so afraid of losing you if I stay. I brushed a tear from her cheek. You won't lose me. Promise? Yes. She closed her eyes, breathing shakily, leaning her forehead against mine. Not a kiss, but almost. Always almost. Then don't give up on me, she whispered. Not yet. Never, I said. And even though the world around us was collapsing in ways neither of us could predict, I meant it. The morning of her first prenatal appointment felt unreal, like time had folded in on itself and dragged us into a version of reality neither of us had ever imagined. Jody moved quietly through the apartment, her hands shaking each time she reached for something, a mug, her jacket, her shoes, only to freeze halfway through the motion as if she had forgotten how to exist in her own skin. I stood near the counter, watching her, waiting for the right moment to offer help without overwhelming her. Every movement she made felt cautious, tender, like she was carrying not just a child, but the shattered remains of her old life. You don't have to come, she murmured suddenly, breaking the silence. She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared at her hands, twisting nervously in her lap. I don't want you to feel obligated. I set down the cup I'd been washing. I want to go. She shook her head slowly. Emma, hearing the heartbeat for the first time it's intimate, emotional. And this isn't her voice cracked before she could finish the sentence. I stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. Jody, I said gently, you asked me to stay. Let me stay. She finally looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, fear, and something else, something fragile and deeply vulnerable that made my chest tighten. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel, she whispered. Neither do I admitted. But we'll figure it out. She exhaled shakily, then nodded. A small, tentative surrender. We left for the clinic together, walking close but not touching, the air thick with things neither of us dared to say. The waiting room smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. Women with round bellies chatted quietly with their partners. A toddler played with a plastic toy on the floor. A nurse called names from behind a glass panel. And Jody sat beside me, stiff as a board, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like she was about to bolt. "Hey," I whispered, leaning slightly toward her. "You're safe." She nodded, but it wasn't conviction, it was hope. When the nurse finally called her name, Jody inhaled sharply and reached for my hand before she realized what she was doing. Our fingers touched, just barely, but the moment was electric, anchoring, undeniable. She let go a second later, embarrassed, but the warmth lingered on my skin. Inside the exam room, she sat on the table, paper crinkling beneath her, and I stood beside her, trying to look calm for her sake. The doctor entered, a kind-looking woman with soft brown eyes and a gentle voice. She asked the usual questions, took notes, smiled reassuringly. But none of it seemed to reach Jody. She stared straight ahead, eyes glazed, breathing shallow. When it was time for the ultrasound, the doctor dimmed the light slightly and turned the screen toward us. Jody's hands shook violently as she lifted her shirt, exposing her abdomen. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to take her fear into my own chest. But the space between us felt fragile, too full of things unsaid to risk breaking. The doctor pressed the cool gel onto her skin. Jody flinched. And then, a moment later, the room filled with a soft, rhythmic sound. A heartbeat.
Fast. Steady. Alive.
Jody's breath caught like someone had punched the air out of her lungs. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes. She covered her mouth with one trembling hand, staring at the screen like she was looking at a ghost, a miracle, and a disaster all at once. "That's your baby," the doctor said gently. Jody let out a small, broken sob. I stepped closer, instinct overriding hesitation, and before I could think twice, I placed my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. She gripped my hand like she was drowning, and I was the only solid thing left in the world. The heartbeat echoed through the room, soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. I felt something shift deep inside me. Not jealousy, not resentment, something quieter, something aching. The understanding that this moment was defining her entire future and reshaping mine. When the exam ended, Jody wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time since the divorce began, with clarity and fear and gratitude intertwined so tightly they were indistinguishable. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here." "Always," I said softly. She held my gaze, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of us. But as we left the clinic, the fragile peace shattered. Her phone buzzed.
Once. Twice.
3 times. A barrage of notifications lighting up the screen. She frowned, confused, then unlocked it, only to turn pale. "Oh no," she whispered. No, Jody," I asked, heart pounding.
She turned the phone toward me.
A message thread.
Dozens of them.
Screenshots.
Posts.
Comments. All sharing the same news. Daniel Montgomery's wife confirms pregnancy amid sudden separation. Rumors circulate that Jody left her husband for a female friend. Sources claim the baby complicates messy divorce. And then, under a photo of Jody walking beside me outside the clinic, likely taken by someone who recognized her. Is this the woman she left her husband for? My stomach dropped. "Someone followed us," Jody whispered, hand shaking violently. "Someone saw me going into the clinic with you." "Jody," I said firmly, "this doesn't mean... It means they think the baby is yours," she choked out. "It means Daniel is going to lose his mind. It means he's going to say, I'm unfit. It means they'll say I'm reckless, unstable, cheating." "Hey," I said, taking her shoulders gently. "Look at me." She couldn't. She was spiraling again, breath quickening, fear rising fast. "Jody," I said more firmly, using her shoulders to steady her. "I'm right here." She finally met my eyes, tears spilling. "Emma, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a mother when I don't even know who I am." And now they're dragging you into it. This is your life too. Your reputation. Your world. And I'm destroying it. You're not. I am, she cried. You're the only thing holding me together, and somehow I'm still breaking you. Her voice cracked, raw and terrified. Tell me the truth. Is this too much? Am I too much? The question pierced through me like a blade. I lifted her chin gently, making her look at me. Jody, I whispered, you could never be too much for me. Something inside her collapsed, not in defeat, but in surrender. Her breath hitched. Her hands trembled. And then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder as she cried softly, trying to muffle the sound so strangers wouldn't stare. I held her, one hand in her hair, the other around her back, my own chest tight with the weight of everything we were becoming. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, I don't want to lose you, Emma. I think that terrifies me more than everything else. I brushed away the tear on her cheek with my thumb. You're not going to lose me. But even as I said it, her phone vibrated again, this time with a name that made my blood run cold. Daniel. Followed by another notification. A voicemail. And then another. A text message. We need to talk.
Now.
And then the final one. A legal notice. He had filed an emergency motion. For what, we didn't yet know. But when Jody's legs buckled beneath her and I caught her just in time, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The storm was nowhere near its peak. If the world had been cruel before, it became merciless after Daniel filed the emergency motion. The notice was waiting in Jody's inbox when we returned home from the clinic, but she didn't have the strength to open it until the next morning. She sat at the kitchen table staring at her laptop, shoulders trembling before she even clicked the email. I sat beside her, silent, steady, the warmth of my arm near hers without touching, because touch felt too dangerous and too necessary all at once. When she finally opened the document, her breath left her in a thin, broken exhale. He's requesting a prenatal injunction, she whispered, eyes scanning the text. He's asking the court to regulate where I live during the pregnancy, who I live with, how much stress I'm under. She blinked hard, reading faster. He's claiming I'm emotionally unstable, that my living arrangements are unsafe, that I'm exposing the pregnancy to unpredictable external influences.
Her voice faltered.
Emma, he's talking about you. My stomach sank, but she kept reading, horror spreading across her face. He's asking for an emergency hearing to force me to relocate to a neutral residence environment conducive to maternal well-being. She swallowed hard. He wants the court to order me to move out of here. Anger flashed through me, sharp and cold. But Jody wasn't angry. She was terrified. He's saying I abandoned the marital home without a transition plan, she continued, voice shaking. He's saying I'm being influenced by someone who undermines the stability of the pregnancy. He's painting me as irrational, overwhelmed, incapable of making sound decisions for my own health. Her hand flew to her mouth. He's preparing for a custody fight before the baby is even born. I place my hand on hers gently. He can't control you like this. But she pulled her hand back, pacing the kitchen, panic rising like a tide. She couldn't outrun. Yes, he can, Emma. You don't understand how easy it is for a man like him to manipulate the narrative. Courts don't give custody to fetuses, but they give injunctions all the time to protect maternal health. If he convinces them I'm unstable or making dangerous choices, she dragged both hands through her hair. God, Emma, he could trap me. He could make it illegal for me to stay here. He could drag me back into his house. He could corner me before I've even figured out who I am. I stood and gently placed my hands on her shoulders, grounding her. Listen to me. You left because you couldn't breathe, because you were drowning. This is just him trying to pull you back under. What if it works? She whispered. What if they believe him? What if they don't? I said softly. She stared at me, lost, shaking, fighting tears. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the table. A voicemail from her sister, another from her mother, and then a text from an unknown number. You ran to your lesbian friend and now you're pregnant? No wonder Daniel wants control. Jody gasped, grabbing the counter to steady herself. Oh God. Oh God, they know. They all know. Jody, I said quickly, don't look at the comments. Someone leaked it, she whispered. Someone leaked that I'm pregnant. Someone leaked that I was at the clinic with you. They're saying you're influencing me. They're saying I'm unstable. They're saying I'm endangering the baby. Her voice cracked violently. Emma, they're weaponizing my pregnancy. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Look at me. She didn't.
Couldn't.
She was spiraling, drowning in fear. I cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet my eyes. I am right here, I whispered. You're not alone in this. She trembled, lips parting like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find any words. Emma, she whispered finally, I don't know why you're staying. I don't know why you'd choose to stay with someone who's breaking apart in front of you. Because I care about you. No, she said, stepping back. It's more than that. And you know it. She swallowed, tears gathering again. You don't deserve to be dragged into a legal disaster because of me. You don't deserve for your name to be tied to rumors about influencing a married woman. You don't deserve this chaos. Maybe I deserve the truth, I said softly. She froze. The air between us tightened. The truth, she whispered. Yes. My voice lowered. That you're terrified. That you're trying to rebuild yourself.
That you trust me.
That you feel something you won't let yourself say because you think loving me will break everything else. Her breath caught. Emma, I love you, I said quietly. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just true. Jody's face crumpled instantly. You can't say that, she whispered, voice breaking.
Not now.
Not while I'm like this. Not when I'm pregnant. Not when I don't know who I am. I'm not asking you to love me back, I said. I'm telling you I'm not going anywhere. But she shook her head, tears falling freely now. If I let myself love you, she cried softly, what happens to everything else? What happens when Daniel twists it? What happens when the courts twist it? What happens if I lose the baby because of stress? What if loving you becomes the thing that ruins me? I stepped closer. She didn't move away. Then let me ruin you into someone stronger, I whispered. Someone free. She let out a soft, wounded sound, her entire body trembling as she whispered, Emma, I'm afraid. Of losing everything. Of losing myself. Of losing you. You won't. For a heartbeat, she believed me. For a heartbeat, we were close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath on my lips. For a heartbeat, she leaned in. And then a knock at the door. Sharp. Repeated. Urgent. Jody flinched violently. I walked to the door, heart pounding, and checked the peephole. A woman in a suit. A courier. Legal documents in hand. When I opened the door, she said, Delivery for Jody Montgomery. Please confirm receipt. I signed mechanically, dread coiling in my stomach. Jody opened the envelope slowly, her hands shaking uncontrollably. When she read the first line, her knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch. Emma, she whispered, voice hollow. He's doing it. He actually filed it. Filed what? I asked gently, kneeling beside her. Her eyes filled with tears as she read aloud. Motion for emergency prenatal conduct restrictions and court-regulated living arrangements. I felt my entire body go cold. He's requesting a court order to force me to move out of here, she whispered. He's asking for legal authority to decide where I live for the rest of the pregnancy. She looked up at me, devastated. Emma, he's trying to separate us by force. Her tears fell freely. He's trying to take away the only safe place I have left. And in that moment, everything inside me shifted. Not just anger. Not just fear. Something deeper. Something solid. Something that would not break. Because losing her, letting him take her away, was no longer an option I could survive. The hours after receiving the injunction request didn't feel real. They felt suspended, like we were living underwater, hearing everything through muffled echoes while the pressure around us kept building towards something inevitable, something catastrophic. Jody sat on the couch with a manila envelope in her lap, staring at the papers as if reading them again might somehow change the words. I paced the apartment because the alternative, the thought of sitting beside her, touching her, comforting her when she was already tearing herself apart, felt like stepping into a fire I wouldn't survive. When she finally spoke, her voice came out thin, cracked, almost childlike. "Emma," she whispered, "if the court grants this, you know I'll have to leave, right?" I froze mid-step. She didn't look at me. She stared at her shaking hands. "They could force me to live with my parents. Or in some supervised apartment Daniel recommends. Or back in the marital home for stability." Her breathing hitched, panic climbing fast. "Emma, I can't go back there. I can't live with him controlling every move I make. I can't go back to being someone I don't recognize. But if the court says I have to," her voice broke entirely, "I'll lose everything." I sat beside her slowly, carefully, terrified she would shatter at the slightest touch. "Jody," I whispered, "listen to me. This injunction isn't a guarantee. It's a request. His lawyers probably wrote it to scare you, to break you before the real fight even begins." She shook her head, tears falling onto the papers. "It's working." "It won't," I said more firmly. "Not if we don't let it." She looked at me then, really looked, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't just fear. It was grief. Heart-deep, bone-deep grief. "Emma," she whispered, "I left that house because I couldn't breathe. I left that marriage because I was suffocating. And when I came here," she hesitated, swallowing hard. "When I came here, it felt like the first breath I'd taken in years." My throat tightened painfully. "I don't want to lose that," she continued, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose you." Her last words cracked me open so violently that I almost forgot how to speak. "You're not going to lose me." But she shook her head again, more desperately this time. "You don't understand, Emma. If they force me to leave, if I'm barred from living with you for the rest of the pregnancy, I'll fall apart. I know I will. Everything inside me is barely holding together, and you're the only thing keeping me steady. The only person I feel safe with. The only person who sees me." Her breath came out in a sob. "If they take you away from me, I don't know who I'll become." Something inside me snapped, some fragile restraint I'd been clinging to so I wouldn't ruin her, overwhelm her, or push her before she was ready. I reached for her hands, closing my fingers around them gently but firmly. "Jody," I said quietly, "I need you to hear me. No court can take me away from you. No judge can decide how close we are. No document can erase what we feel." Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. "What we feel," she repeated softly, like she was afraid to hope the words were real. My heartbeat hammered so hard it hurt.
Yes.
"What we feel." She inhaled shakily, dropping her gaze, her voice trembling like she already knew the truth, but needed to hear it anyway. "Emma, what do you feel?" There it was. The question she had been avoiding since the night she kissed me. The question she was finally brave enough, or broken enough, to ask. I didn't let myself look away. "I love you." The words didn't explode. They didn't echo. They simply settled into the air between us like something inevitable. Jody's breath caught, her lips parting in shock, her fingers tightening instinctively around mine. "Emma, I know you're scared," I continued, voice softer now. "I know you're drowning in guilt and fear and confusion. I know you don't want to hurt me, but I'm already in this with you. I've been in love with you for years. Long before the kiss. Long before the divorce. Long before you ever realized something inside you was breaking." Tears spilled faster down her cheeks. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," I said. "And because you were married. And because you didn't know who you were yet. And because loving you felt like wanting something I could never have." She closed her eyes, shoulders shaking. When she opened them again, something raw and luminous had replaced the fear, something like longing. "Emma," she whispered, "I can't promise anything. I can't say I'm ready for this. I can't say I know who I am yet. I can't even say I understand everything I'm feeling. But I know one thing." She lifted her hands, placing them on either side of my face with a tenderness that made my breath catch. You're the only person I don't feel completely lost with. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then you're not lost, I whispered. Not here. She exhaled, trembling, her forehead lowering until it rested lightly against mine. I'm terrified of needing you this much. I'm terrified too.
Why?
Because if anything takes you away from me, I whispered, I don't know how I'll survive it. The honesty between us was a living thing now. Heavy, electric, undeniable. She let out a quiet sob and pressed her forehead harder against mine. I don't want to lose you, she whispered again, the words breaking every time they left her mouth. Not because of him. Not because of this pregnancy. Not because of anything. My hands slid slowly to her waist, holding her as gently as I could, afraid she might vanish if I touched her too firmly. You won't. Her breath hitched, once, twice, and then she whispered the words that finally shattered the last barrier between us. Then hold me like I'm allowed to want you. And I did. I pulled her into my arms, and she melted into me instantly, soft, trembling, hungry for comfort and connection and something deeper she hadn't let herself name. She leaned into me, pressing her face into my neck, her hands clutching my shirt as if anchoring herself. I held her like she was something fragile and precious and meant to be protected. Her breath warmed my skin. Mine hitched painfully in my throat. And then she pulled back, slowly, achingly, her hands sliding from my shoulders to my jaw, lifting my face until our eyes met. Everything in her expression, fear, longing, confusion, devotion, collided into something fierce and unbearably tender. Emma, she whispered, voice shaking, I'm going to ruin you. I shook my head. Then ruin me gently. A single tear rolled down her cheek.
She leaned in.
And this time, nothing interrupted us. Not a phone call. Not a knock. Not a breaking thought or a moment of fear. Her lips met mine slowly, cautiously at first, like she was afraid I might break under the weight of her touch. But when I kissed her back, when I let myself finally taste the thing I had been craving for years, she let out a soft, desperate sound that vibrated straight through me. And then she deepened the kiss, her hands sliding into my hair, her breath trembling as she pulled me closer, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. It wasn't a frantic kiss. It wasn't a confused kiss. It wasn't a drunken, impulsive mistake. It was deliberate, tender, devastating, and it was real. When she finally pulled away, her forehead rested against mine, her breath warm and unsteady, her voice barely a whisper. I shouldn't have done that. I'm glad you did. A soft, broken smile ghosted across her lips. God help us, she murmured. Everything just changed. She was right. It had. The morning after the kiss felt like waking into a reality I didn't know how to navigate. Not because I regretted it, God. Regret was the farthest thing from my mind, but because everything inside me felt rewired. If Jody sensed the shift, and I knew she did, she pretended otherwise at first. She moved around the apartment quietly, cautiously, like someone testing a floor after an earthquake. She made tea, but her hands shook. She sat on the couch, but her shoulders were tense. She looked at me several times, but each time she pulled her gaze away before I could hold it. I didn't push. I didn't speak. I let her breathe. But every minute of silence felt like a thread pulling tighter between us, a tension that wasn't fear or hesitation anymore. It was awareness. Finally, she exhaled shakily and whispered, without looking at me, Emma, about last night. I swallowed, steadying myself. Yes. She closed her eyes. I shouldn't have kissed you. My chest tightened painfully, but she continued before I could respond. But I'm not sorry. My breath caught. She lifted her gaze then, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't confusion. It was clarity, terrifying, overwhelming clarity. I've been thinking about that kiss all night, she whispered. And all morning. And I don't know what terrifies me more, that I kissed you or that I want to do it again. Heat rushed through me so quickly, I almost forgot how to breathe. But then she shook her head, pulling back into herself. I'm not ready, she whispered. Not for the consequences. Not for what this means. Not with the pregnancy. Not with the court watching everything I do. She wrapped her arms around her stomach without realizing it, a defensive gesture she'd been doing more and more. I can't make a mistake, she whispered, because it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy this baby's future. And maybe you too. I stepped closer. Slowly.
Carefully.
Jody, loving someone isn't a mistake. It could be, she whispered, her voice trembling, if it puts you in danger. I frowned. Danger? She hesitated, but the truth burst out anyway. Since the news leaked, she whispered, I've been getting messages, comments, accusations, strangers saying you seduced a married woman. People saying I'm mentally unfit because I'm experimenting while pregnant. People saying you're trying to raise someone else's baby. People saying I'm ruining your life. I clenched my jaw.
Hard.
Let me see them. No, she said instantly. You don't get to protect me from things like this. I snapped without meaning to. Emma, she whispered, I don't want you to spend the rest of your life cleaning up my chaos. I don't want to be the reason people doubt your character. Or your career. Or your goodness. Something inside me ached. You're not a burden. I feel like one. You're not. She looked away, tears forming again. Everything about this pregnancy feels like a chain dragging me backward. Every time I try to move forward, something snaps tight and yanks me into a version of myself I'm trying to escape. Her voice softened into a whisper. But when I kissed you, I felt free. And I can't afford freedom right now. I need stability. I need safety. Then let me be that, I whispered. She stared at me, breath trembling. You already are, she said softly. That's what scares me. Before I could answer, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. Not a neighborly knock. Not a gentle one. A demanding, forceful pounding that jolted both of us upright. Jody stiffened instantly. Her hands flew protectively to her stomach. Emma, she whispered, don't answer it. But the knock came again, harder. 3 sharp hits that reverberated through the door and through her body. I think it's my attorney, she said breathlessly. I asked her to come. I needed someone to help me understand the injunction.
But her voice didn't sound relieved.
It sounded terrified. I opened the door slightly, keeping the chain on. A woman in her mid-40s stood there. Dark blazer, sharp expression, tablet in hand. Her eyes flicked over me with professional efficiency. You must be Emma. I'm Mara Singh, Jody's attorney. We need to talk.
Now.
I let her in. Jody stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. Mara didn't waste time. I read the emergency injunction, she said bluntly. It's aggressive, borderline abusive, and strategically designed to corner you. Jody swallowed. Can he win? Mara hesitated. That alone made my stomach drop. Judges don't like to interfere in a pregnant woman's living arrangements unless there's evidence of danger, she said. But Daniel is smart. He framed it as a mental health and prenatal well-being issue. I'm not mentally unstable, Jody whispered. I know that, Mara said gently. But he's making it look like you're making chaotic decisions under emotional distress. Leaving the marital home without a plan. Staying with someone who has no relation to the baby. Significant lifestyle changes. Public scrutiny. Viral speculation. She glanced at me briefly. A rumored romantic entanglement. Jody flinched. Hard. It's not. It doesn't matter, Mara interrupted. Perception is everything. And Daniel is building a narrative that you're unpredictable, impressionable, unsafe. Jody's breathing quickened. What do I do? Mara exhaled. We have 24 hours to file a counter-declaration. But we need evidence that your environment here is stable. She looked around my apartment. Modest, lived in, warm. Is this your residence? She asked me. Yes. You live alone? Yes. Steady job? Clean record? Yes and yes. Mara nodded slowly. That helps. A lot. But she hesitated again. There is something else. Jody's eyes widened in terror. What? Someone leaked your prenatal appointment, Mara said. Photos.
Times.
Location. Online forums are speculating that Emma is the other parent. Some are calling her the reason for your divorce. It's painting you as reckless and emotionally dependent. Jody covered her mouth with both hands. No, she whispered. No, 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 I'm sorry, Mara said softly. But we need to address it. Jody broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, completely. She sank onto the couch and crumpled forward, sobbing into her hands as if the weight of the entire world had finally become too much to carry. I dropped to my knees in front of her, ignoring Mara, ignoring the legal nightmare looming over us. Jody, I whispered, placing my hands gently on her thighs. Look at me. She couldn't. So I lifted my hand slowly and brushed a tear from her cheek. Jody, please, I whispered, my voice breaking. Look at me. Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red, swollen, raw with fear. Emma, she whispered, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my child. I'm going to lose my freedom. And I'm going to lose you. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in devotion. Fierce, unshakable devotion. You are not losing me, I said firmly. You're not losing your baby. You're not losing your future. How do you know? She cried. Because I won't let you, I whispered. I will fight with you. I will stand by you. And I will not let him rewrite the truth of who you are. She stared at me like she was seeing hope for the first time in months. Emma, her voice trembled. I don't know how to keep going. Then let me help you. She leaned forward as if pulled by gravity, her breath trembling, her lips parting with words she didn't know how to say. But Mara's voice cut through the moment. We need to prepare a statement. Today. Jody flinched, startled back into herself. But she didn't look away from me. Not this time. And as she whispered, please don't leave me alone, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped until now. She didn't need saving. She needed anchoring. She needed someone who wouldn't break, even when she did. I took her hands in mine, gently pulling her to her feet. I'm here, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere. But even as I said it, a cold, unsettling thought crept into my mind, because amidst all the chaos, all the pressure, all the legal threats, I had missed something. Something important. Something dangerous. And I didn't realize what it was until later that night, when Jody woke up screaming. I woke to the sound of Jody screaming my name. Not calling, not whimpering, screaming. A raw, desperate, terrified sound that sliced straight through my chest before I was even fully conscious. I bolted upright, heart hammering, vision still blurry with sleep, and found her sitting upright in the bed, clutching her stomach, shaking violently. Emma, she gasped, breath coming in shallow, broken bursts. Something's wrong. Oh God, Emma, something's wrong. Panic tore through me, cold and sharp. I scrambled to her side, cupping her face gently as I tried to steady her trembling. Jody, look at me, what's happening? Where does it hurt? She shook her head frantically, eyes wide with terror. There was pain, it woke me up. I couldn't breathe, my stomach, Emma, I thought. Her voice cracked into a sob. I thought I was losing the baby. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed her coat, my keys, my phone, and practically lifted her into my arms. She clung to me, fingers digging into my shoulders, breath coming out in quick, shallow gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. It's okay, I whispered, even though fear was clawing its way up my spine. I've got you. I'm here. Just breathe. Hold on to me. But she couldn't stop shaking.
Couldn't stop crying.
And every time she whispered, my baby, something inside me cracked wide open. The hospital was a blur of harsh lights, antiseptic air, and urgent voices. Nurses moved quickly, guiding Jody into a wheelchair while I held her hand so tightly I could feel her pulse hammering against my palm. She's 13 weeks, I told them, my voice barely steady. Pain woke her up.
Severe.
She thought she was miscarrying. Jody was too overwhelmed to speak. The nurse nodded and pressed a reassuring hand to her shoulder. "We'll take care of you, sweetheart. Just breathe." Deep breaths. For a moment, she looked like a child, small, terrified, clinging to the only safe thing she could find. Which, for better or worse, was me. They led her toward the ultrasound room, but a second nurse held up a hand to stop me. "You'll need to wait here for a moment." Jody tensed instantly. No, please, Emma, don't leave me. Please." I stepped forward. "She needs me." "We just need to do a quick assessment first," the nurse said gently. "Then she can come in." Jody's grip tightened around my hand, her eyes wild. "Emma, please, don't let them take me in alone. I'm scared." My chest tightened painfully. "I'm right here," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But they had to separate us, even for a moment. And I watched her disappear behind the curtain with a nurse, trembling, still reaching for me until the very last second. It was one of the worst moments of my life. Minutes dragged like hours. Every sound in the hallway made my stomach twist. I couldn't sit. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct inside me screamed to run in there, to refuse to let her face this alone. Then, finally, a nurse peeked out from behind the curtain. She stabilized. "You can join her now." I rushed inside. Jody lay on the exam table, eyes red, cheeks wet, hands resting on her abdomen protectively. When she saw me, she broke into another wave of tears, not out of panic now, but out of sheer relief. "Emma," she whispered. I was at her side instantly, taking her hand in both of mine. "I'm here. I'm here." She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her forehead against the back of my hand. "I thought I lost the baby," she whispered. "I thought it was over." My voice cracked. "But you didn't. You're here. The baby's here. You're safe." She took a shuddering breath as the doctor entered, a calm-looking woman holding a tablet. "Jody," she said gently, "we ran some preliminary scans. The pain you experienced is concerning, but not necessarily a sign of miscarriage. We need to do a full ultrasound to evaluate everything. Emma can stay with you for this part." She nodded weakly, still gripping my hand. The room dimmed slightly as the doctor prepared the machine. Jody trembled as the gel touched her skin, and I brushed my thumb over her knuckles, grounding her. The screen flickered. The doctor moved the probe slowly, carefully. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then there it was. A flicker. A flutter. A tiny rhythmic pulse. The heartbeat.
Strong. Steady. Alive.
Jody's entire body collapsed into sobs of pure, overwhelming relief. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God." I pressed my forehead against hers, tears spilling from my own eyes now. "See," I whispered. "They're okay. You're okay." But the doctor's expression didn't match our relief. Her brow furrowed slightly as she adjusted the angle, then zoomed in. "The baby's heart rate is strong," she said carefully, "but there is something we need to monitor closely." Fear slammed back into Jody's body.
"What?"
"What's wrong?" "There appears to be a small subchorionic hematoma," the doctor said gently. "It can cause abdominal pain and bleeding. Many pregnancies progress normally, but it does increase certain risks. We'll need to monitor you closely." Jody's face went white. "Is the baby in danger?" "Not at this moment," the doctor reassured. "But you need rest, reduce stress, no sudden movements, and absolutely no emotional upheaval." My stomach twisted. Emotional upheaval was her entire life right now. "Given the legal situation you mentioned to the nurses," the doctor added, "I strongly recommend you avoid any conflict during this pregnancy. Stress can significantly worsen your condition." Jody looked at me, pleading, terrified, desperate. "Emma," she whispered, "what am I going to do?" The doctor stepped out to give us privacy. Jody crumpled again, her body shaking violently as she whispered, "If Daniel finds out, if he learns there's a complication, he'll use it. He'll say I'm unfit. He'll say I'm putting the baby in danger. He'll force me back into his house. He'll use this to control everything I do." I gathered her in my arms before she could spiral further.
"Jody."
"Look at me," She lifted her eyes, swimming with fear. You're not unfit. You're not unsafe. This isn't your fault. And you don't have to fight this alone. But I can't lose you, she whispered. And I can't lose this baby. Then we'll make a plan, I said firmly. We'll talk tomorrow. We'll document everything. We'll follow every medical instruction. And we'll protect you. Both of you. She let out a shaky breath and leaned into me, her lips brushing my shoulder. Not intentionally, not intimately, just instinctively. But it still sent heat through me, fierce and protective. Emma, she whispered after a long, trembling silence. Yes. If something happens to me, if something happens to the baby, promise me you won't blame yourself. My throat tightened. Nothing is going to happen to you. Promise me, she insisted, voice breaking. I swallowed hard. I promise. She exhaled softly, closing her eyes, forehead resting against my chest. For the first time since she found out she was pregnant, she let herself be held without resisting, without guilt, without fear of what it meant. And in that moment, feeling her breath against my skin, her fingers curled lightly into my shirt, her heartbeat slowly steadying, I realized something with terrifying clarity. I would burn the world down before I let anything happen to her. Or to her child. Hours later, when she was discharged with strict instructions for rest and stress avoidance, I guided her into the car gently. She clung to my hand the entire ride home. And just before she fell asleep on the couch, curled against my side like she'd spent her entire life there, she whispered something that shattered me completely. Emma, when I thought I lost the baby, the only thing I could think was, I can't leave Emma alone in this world. She didn't hear my breath catch. She was already asleep. But those words, they wrapped around my heart and refused to let go. The days after the hospital felt suspended between two worlds, one where Jody was still fighting for her freedom, and one where she was fighting just to make it to the next morning without collapsing under the weight of everything pressing down on her. The doctors had been clear. Rest, calm, no physical stress, absolutely no emotional upheaval. But emotional upheaval was the air Jody had been breathing for months. And now, every time her hand drifted to her stomach, every time she winced from even the faintest twinge of discomfort, I felt something inside me twist so hard it made breathing difficult. She spent most of the day on the couch, curled under a soft blanket, one hand resting protectively over her abdomen. I adjusted pillows endlessly, made herbal teas, heated soups, dimmed the lights when her head hurt, sat beside her when silence felt too loud. She didn't argue or pretend she didn't need help. The terror from the hospital lingered in her eyes, softening her in ways that made me want to wrap her in my arms and never let anything or anyone touch her again. On the second evening, as I tucked a blanket around her legs, she whispered, I'm sorry. I froze. For what? For needing you so much. I knelt beside the couch, so we were eye level. Jody, I said softly, I need you to stop apologizing for existing. Tears formed instantly, but she blinked them back. Everyone in my life expects me to be self-sufficient, even when I'm drowning. You're the only one who lets me fall apart. My chest tightened. Then fall. I'll catch you. She let out a trembling breath, her fingers brushing mine in a gesture so fragile it felt like something sacred. The quiet between us deepened, warm, charged, intimate. She didn't pull her hand away. That alone told me everything I needed to know. But the peace didn't last. It never did. On the third morning, Mara called, her voice clipped. I'm coming over. We need to talk. Jody sat up too quickly, wincing. I was beside her instantly, easing her back down, my hand hovering over her abdomen. She touched my wrist lightly. I'm okay, she whispered, but the strain in her voice betrayed her. When Mara arrived, she looked graver than she had the day before. She sat across from Jody, folder in hand, expression tight. There's been a development. Jody's grip on the blanket tightened. What now? Mara sighed. Daniel's lawyers have filed a supplemental declaration. They're using your hospitalization as evidence of instability. Jody's face drained of color. They're blaming me? They're blaming everything. Mara said carefully. Your emotional state, your abrupt lifestyle change, your current living situation. She paused, looking briefly at me. They've even implied the hematoma could have been caused by stress related to your separation. I stared at her, stunned. That's impossible, I said sharply. The doctor said, we know what the doctor said, Mara replied. But they're manipulating it. They're arguing that returning to a structured environment, meaning the marital home, would reduce the risk of further complications. Jody pressed a shaking hand against her mouth. He's using my pregnancy to force me back. Yes, Mara said quietly. And the court is required to prioritize the health of the unborn child. Jody's breath hitched. So he could win. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Jody's eyes welled with tears, slow, heavy tears that slid down her cheeks but didn't fall dramatically. They fell like surrender. I can't go back, she whispered. Emma, I can't. I took her hand before she spiraled too far. You're not going back, I said firmly. Not while I'm breathing. She looked at me, really looked, and something in her expression cracked. Not fear, not panic, something deeper, something like devotion. But the moment was cut short. Mara cleared her throat and slid a tablet across the table. There's more. Jody hesitated, then reached for it. Her fingers trembled. A video began to play. Grainy footage of us outside the clinic. Me holding her. Jody leaning into me, crying. The caption, the woman she left her husband for. Jody stared in horror. This wasn't even. It doesn't matter, Mara said. Perception becomes narrative. And narrative becomes leverage. Jody set the tablet aside as though it burned her. So what do I do? She whispered. How do I fight someone who twists every part of my life into something ugly? Mara softened her voice. We build a counter-narrative. A strong one. But you need to be careful. Very careful. Any public display of affection between you two could be used against you. Jody froze.
Completely.
Pain flickered across her face. Sharp, immediate, the kind of pain that had nothing to do with pregnancy. So I can't be near her, she whispered. You can, Mara clarified. But discreetly. No touching in public. No rumors. Nothing emotionally revealing that can be recorded or misinterpreted. Jody's eyes filled again. I can't even hold her hand when I'm scared? Privately, yes, Mara said. But publicly, it could hurt your case. Jody broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly and completely, her voice splintering. Everything he does forces me to choose between my safety, my child, and her eyes moved to me. And the person I'm falling for. The air left my lungs. Slowly. Painfully. She didn't correct herself. She didn't take it back. Mara stood, giving us space. I'll come back tonight, she said softly. We'll work on the declaration then. When the door closed behind her, Jody crumpled. She leaned forward, covering her face with both hands, sobs shaking through her like her body was trying to release months, years, of fear and heartbreak. I sat beside her, pulling her gently into my arms. She collapsed into me instantly, her forehead pressing into my collarbone, her fingers clutching my shirt. Emma, she whispered through tears, I'm so scared. I held her tighter. I know. I don't want to go back. Not even for a second. I can't breathe there. I can't exist there. You won't, I said fiercely. I won't let him take you. She leaned back slightly, just enough to see my face. Her eyes were red, wet, but burning with something raw and searching. Why do you fight for me like this? She whispered. I cupped her cheek, wiping a tear with my thumb. Because I love you. She inhaled sharply, broken, reverent. And what if I'm starting to love you too? My heart stopped. Completely. She swallowed, her voice trembling. What if that's why everything hurts so much? I didn't kiss her. The doctors had warned her against stress. But I touched her cheek, soft and slow, letting her lean into my hand. Then we go at your pace, I whispered. No pressure. No fear. Just us. She closed her eyes, letting my forehead rest against hers. Emma? Yes. When this is over, when I'm free, I want to choose you. Not out of fear. Not out of need. Out of love. My breath trembled. Then I'll wait, I whispered. For as long as you need. She exhaled, soft and shaky, her lips brushing the space where my jaw met my cheek. Not a kiss, but not far from one. And that was enough.
For now.
Mara warned us that we couldn't postpone seeing Daniel forever. The judge will want to know whether the two of you can communicate civilly about the pregnancy, she'd said. Avoiding him only strengthens his claim that you're unstable. Jody had gone pale at the idea. She hadn't been in the same room as Daniel since the day she left their house, her prison, for the last time. But the supplemental filings, the leaked video, and the medical complication had pushed everything to a breaking point. The meeting wasn't optional anymore. So on the morning of the confrontation, she sat on the edge of my bed, fingers twisting anxiously in the hem of her sweatshirt, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. I knelt in front of her, cupping her knees gently. Hey, I whispered. Look at me. She finally met my eyes. I can't do this, Emma. Yes, I said softly. You can. And you're not going alone. She swallowed hard, tears gathering. What if being near him makes the pain worse?
What if the stress triggers something?
What if? Then we leave, I said immediately. The second your body tells you something is wrong, we walk out. No permission. No apology. Her lip trembled. And if he tries to use that against me? Then let him try, I whispered. I dare him to try while I'm in the room. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also something like strength waking up inside her. Okay, she breathed. Okay. She stood slowly, carefully, one hand instinctively over her stomach. I offer my arm. She took it without hesitation. We drove in silence, the tension thick and electric. The meeting was set in a neutral mediator's office downtown, but it didn't matter. Neutral was impossible when trauma walked into the room with you. When we arrived, Daniel was already there. He stood as we entered, wearing the same perfectly pressed suit, the same controlled expression, the same hollow charm he'd always used to manipulate everyone around him. But Jody wasn't the same woman he'd last seen. She wasn't broken under him anymore. She wasn't quiet. And she wasn't alone. His gaze flicked to me almost immediately. Calculating. Cold. Contempt barely hidden beneath practiced politeness. Then he looked at Jody, really looked, and something in his face cracked for a fraction of a second. Regret? Anger? Shock. I couldn't tell. But he hadn't expected her to look so alive. Even afraid, even fragile, even exhausted, she had something in her eyes that she never had in their marriage. Selfhood. Jody, he said, stepping forward. You look tired. You should be resting. She flinched at his tone, soft, paternal, suffocating. I'm fine, she whispered.
His jaw tightened.
You shouldn't be out in your condition. My spine straightened at the possessiveness in his voice. She's under medical supervision, I said coolly. She's following her doctor's orders. He turned to me with a tight smile. I wasn't speaking to you. But you were speaking about her. I replied calmly. So you're speaking to me as well. Something dark flickered in his eyes. But Jody's fingers found mine, just barely, and squeezed. The mediator entered before Daniel could respond. She gestured for everyone to sit. The room felt too small, too bright, too sharp around the edges. We're here, the mediator began, to discuss concerns regarding the prenatal injunction requested by Mr. Montgomery. Jody stiffened. Daniel folded his hands neatly. Concern number one, he said smoothly, is that Jody made impulsive decisions that directly resulted in a high-risk complication. Her doctor confirmed a subchorionic hematoma. The mediator nodded. And your claim is that stress from her living environment contributed? Exactly, he said. She left the marital home without warning, without a plan, influenced by external parties. I felt Jody tense beside me. And as a result, her emotional state deteriorated. The mediator glanced at Jody. How do you respond? Jody opened her mouth, but no words came out. She shook, trembled, looked at Daniel, and saw the man who'd stolen her voice for years. So I spoke. Her emotional distress developed under your roof, not mine. Daniel scoffed softly. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife. I corrected. Soon to be. And this is about her well-being. The mediator raised a hand. Let's stay focused. Jody, do you feel unsafe returning to the marital home during your pregnancy? Jody swallowed hard. Yes. Daniel's expression twisted. Unsafe. Yes, she whispered, her voice fragile but clear. I can't breathe there. I can't sleep. I can't think. Being in that house makes me feel like I'm disappearing again. Disappearing, he repeated, incredulous. Jody, I supported you. I provided for you. I gave you stability. You controlled me, she whispered. The room went silent. Daniel blinked.
Once. Twice.
I what? You controlled everything, she continued, tears rising but voice steadying. Where I went.
Who I saw.
How I spoke. What I felt. You never listened unless it made you look good. You never saw me unless it benefited you. Daniel's facade cracked. That's not fair. It's the truth, she whispered. And I won't go back. He leaned forward, voice cold. You think running away with your little friend here is safer? He spat the word friend like poison. Jody flinched, and something inside me snapped. You don't get to belittle her support, I said sharply. She left you because she couldn't breathe. She stays with me because she can. The mediator intervened again. Mr. Montgomery, please refrain from antagonizing. Daniel exhaled sharply. The baby needs stability. Then stop destabilizing her, I said. Stop filing emergency orders to control where she sleeps. Stop weaponizing her medical records. Stop leaking information to the press. His eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me of something? I'm naming what you've been doing. Jody suddenly spoke again, louder this time. Stop. We both turned to her. Her hands were pressed against her stomach, not from pain, but from grounding. I'm done letting you talk about me like I'm not here, she said to Daniel. I'm done letting you twist everything into a narrative where you're the victim and I'm the unstable one. Her chin lifted, trembling but defiant. I left because I wasn't safe with you. Not physically. Emotionally. Mentally. You broke me in ways I didn't understand until I walked out the door. Daniel's face paled. The mediator's pen froze mid-sentence. Jody continued, voice tightening. And don't you dare use this baby as a tool to control me again. He blinked rapidly. Again? Yes, she whispered, tears spilling. Again. You only want custody because it gives you power, not because you want to be a father. He stood abruptly, anger flashing. How dare you, sit, the mediator commanded, voice sharp.
He did. Slowly.
Rage simmering beneath his skin. This meeting is over, she declared. Further discussions will happen through legal channels only. Daniel glared at Jody. You're making a mistake. She stood, shaking, but unbroken. The only mistake I made was staying with you as long as I did. I helped her gather her things. Daniel watched us, jaw clenched, chest rising with quick breaths he tried to hide. When we reached the door, he said something low, directed not at her, but at me. You think she loves you now, he said. But she'll remember who she was before you twisted her. I turned toward him, calm and steady. She's remembering who she is because of me, not despite me. His expression faltered, just slightly, enough to know he finally understood. He had lost her long before he knew there was anything to lose. Outside, the moment the door closed, Jody's strength crumbled like sand under a wave. She grabbed my coat, burying her face against my chest, sobbing silently into the fabric. I wrapped my arms around her, protecting, sheltering, holding her like the most precious thing I'd ever been trusted with. It's over, I whispered. You did it. You faced him. You did it. She clung tighter. I couldn't have done it without you. She pulled back then, just slightly, her hands still gripping my coat. Her face was red, wet, trembling. But her eyes, God, her eyes, burned with something fierce and clear. Emma, she whispered, I'm not confused anymore. I felt my breath catch.
About what?
She swallowed. About what I feel. The world narrowed to the space between us. Her fingers slid slowly from my coat to my waist, her touch hesitant, but intentional. When I looked at him, she whispered, there was nothing. And when I looked at you, she stepped closer. Everything made sense. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid she could hear it. Jody, she shook her head, eyes shining. I choose you. And then she kissed me, soft, trembling, but sure. Not out of fear. Not out of confusion. Not out of desperation. But out of certainty. Out of love finding its way through the cracks. The world didn't explode the moment Jody kissed me. It didn't stop. It didn't shift off its axis or burst into fireworks the way every movie promised it would when two people finally crossed the line between longing and certainty. Instead, everything went silent. Utterly, beautifully silent. Her lips were warm and trembling against mine, tasting faintly of fear and hope at the same time, and her hands clutched the fabric of my coat as though letting go of me meant falling straight through the earth's surface. I kissed her back, gently, afraid of overwhelming her, afraid of hurting her, afraid of making this moment something heavy when it needed to be weightless. When we finally parted, her forehead rested against mine, our breaths mixing in the cold air, as though we were learning to breathe again, together, for the first time. I don't regret that, she whispered. Her voice cracked, soft but steady. And I don't think I ever will. I brushed my thumb over her cheek, wiping a tear she didn't notice had escaped. You don't need to explain anything, I whispered. You don't owe me a single justification. She closed her eyes, letting my touch ground her. I know, she murmured. That's why I want to. But the moment, our moment, lasted only seconds longer before reality crashed back into her body. She gasped, one hand flying to her stomach. Are you okay? I asked immediately, my arms going around her instinctively. She nodded, though her breath hitched. Just too much adrenaline. I'm okay. I promise. But she wasn't. Not entirely. The meeting had drained her, and the kiss, beautiful as it was, had pulled from a heart already stretched thin. I guided her carefully to the car, helping her in, buckling the seatbelt when her hands trembled too much to do it herself. The drive home was quiet, gentle quiet, not tense. She kept her hand resting on her stomach and, every few minutes, reached for my free hand as though reminding herself I was still there. Or as though reminding herself she was allowed to reach for me now. When we arrived, she didn't wait for me to open her door. She simply leaned her head on my shoulder as soon as I sat beside her on the couch, curling into me like she had chosen the shape of my body long before choosing my heart. For a while, neither of us spoke. I just held her, feeling her breathing even out, feeling her tension melt with each slow exhale. Finally, she whispered, "Do you think I complicated your life beyond repair?" "No," I said instantly. "You gave it meaning." She exhaled shakily, her fingers sliding between mine in a gesture both nervous and deliberate. When I kissed you, I felt like I was stepping into something true. Maybe the first true thing I've ever allowed myself to want. My heart tightened. "Jody, don't interrupt," she said softly, pressing her cheek against my shoulder. "I need to say this while I'm brave enough." I stayed silent. She breathed slowly, deeply. For years, I thought the problem was me. That I was broken. That I wasn't grateful enough. That I wasn't a good enough wife or a good enough woman because I never felt whole in the life I built with Daniel. Her fingers tightened around mine. But then I realized I never built that life. I stepped into the one people expected me to have. "Jody," I whispered, "you were surviving." She nodded. And surviving felt like the same thing as living until I walked out the door, and it didn't. A long silence stretched between us, but not a heavy one. A revealing one. She whispered, barely audible, "I think I've loved you longer than I understood." That was the moment I nearly broke. Not from sadness. Not from fear. From the overwhelming tenderness of hearing something I had buried so deep it fossilized inside me. Before I could speak, her phone buzzed violently on the table. We both startled. The screen lit with Daniel. Jody's entire body tensed as though she had been plunged into ice water. She didn't answer. The buzzing stopped. Then another notification appeared, an email preview. And another. And another. My heart dropped as I read the subject line repeated over and over. Statement released. What did he do? Jody whispered, her voice trembling. I opened the first preview, and my stomach twisted. Oh God, I breathed. Daniel had released a statement to the media, a polished, manipulative, cruel masterpiece. My wife is experiencing emotional instability related to her unexpected pregnancy. I remain committed to supporting her and ensuring the safety of our unborn child. Unfortunately, she's been influenced by someone who does not have her best interests at heart. I ask for privacy during this difficult time. Influenced? Jody whispered. He called me unstable. Her breathing grew sharp. Too sharp. Her hand went to her chest. Jody, I said, sliding closer. Look at me, just look at me. But she was spiraling, chest rising fast, breath quick and shallow.
Panic attack.
Worse. Panic attack while pregnant and exhausted. I held her face gently, forcing her to meet my eyes. Breathe with me. In slowly, that's it, now out, you're safe, you're here. I've got you, nobody is taking anything from you. She gripped my wrists hard, her breathing sinking with mine little by little until the trembling eased and her shoulders slumped. He's trying to destroy me, she whispered. He's trying to destroy us. He can't, I said firmly. He won't. Emma, she said, tears spilling again. I don't know how much more I can take. I pulled her into my arms carefully, cradling her against me, whispering into her hair. Then I'll carry the rest. You don't have to do this alone anymore. She clung to me with a desperation that wasn't fear, it was surrender. The kind that only comes when someone finally realizes they're no longer drowning alone. But the night wasn't done. Hours later, after she'd fallen asleep curled against me, my phone lit up with a message from Mara. We need to meet first thing in the morning. This is bigger than we thought. Daniel is preparing to request emergency decision-making authority regarding the pregnancy. My blood went cold. That kind of request wasn't custody. It was worse. It meant Daniel was trying to control Jody's medical decisions, her living arrangements, her autonomy as a mother, as a woman, as a human being. I looked down at Jody sleeping against me, her face still streaked with dried tears, her hand resting protectively over her stomach even in her dreams. And I made a decision right then. I would burn the entire world down before I let him take anything else from her. Before I let him take her at all. The morning of the hearing arrived with an eerie stillness, the kind that settles before a storm finally breaks. Jody hadn't slept. I could tell not only by the faint shadows beneath her eyes, but by the way she kept touching her stomach, as though grounding both herself and the tiny heartbeat inside her. I watched her button her coat slowly, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to hide it. If you're not ready, I whispered, stepping closer, we can ask for a continuance. She shook her head immediately.
No.
I'm done delaying. I'm done being afraid. He wants control. She lifted her chin, fire igniting behind her exhaustion. Today he learns he doesn't own me anymore. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into the touch instinctively, her breath catching for a moment. Whatever happens, she whispered, don't leave my side. Wild horses couldn't drag me, I said. And I meant it. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Not tense silence, but anticipatory silence. The kind that grows when two people are standing on the edge of a moment that changes everything. Mara met us outside, her expression stern, professional, but softened by something almost like protectiveness. He's pushing hard, she warned as we walked inside. His lawyers prepared a powerful argument. Their angle is that Jody's emotional instability and medical complication justify granting Daniel temporary decision-making authority regarding prenatal care and living arrangements. Jody inhaled sharply. So, he wants the court to tell me where I'm allowed to live. Yes, Mara said. and potentially which treatments you can accept, which doctors you can see, and whether your living situation is considered safe. A tremor ran through Jody's fingers, and I quietly laced mine with hers. Mara saw it, and her voice softened. But today is also your chance to show the court that you are stable, grounded, and in full control of your choices. Jody nodded, though fear still flickered in her eyes. We entered the courtroom. Daniel was already seated at his table, perfectly composed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent. When he looked at Jody, something darkened behind his eyes, something between possession and resentment. When he looked at me, that darkness sharpened. Hatred disguised as civility. The hearing began. Daniel's attorney stood, speaking with a polished compassion that made bile rise in my throat. Your Honor, our only concern is the unborn child's welfare. Mrs. Montgomery, he gestured toward Jody like she was a fragile object, has exhibited erratic behavior, sudden lifestyle changes, emotional breakdowns, and has recently suffered a high-risk medical complication. Mr. Montgomery is requesting temporary authority to ensure safe, stable conditions for the remainder of the pregnancy. The judge nodded, taking notes. Then the attorney added, with false gentleness, we also have evidence that Mrs. Montgomery is currently residing with an unrelated woman who may not have her best interests in mind. Jody flinched. I felt my jaw tighten. The attorney clicked a remote, projecting images onto a screen. Me holding Jody outside the clinic, Jody leaning into my chest, tears visible. This, he continued, raises questions about whether the emotional involvement between the two is clouding Mrs. Montgomery's judgment during a critical time. That was it. I felt Jody's hand tighten painfully around mine. I squeezed back. Hold.
Steady. Breathe.
When it was our turn, Mara stood.
Calm.
Precise.
Deadly.
Your Honor, what my client has exhibited is not instability, it's trauma recovery. Mrs. Montgomery left a controlling environment after years of emotional suppression. The stress contributing to her medical complication was the marriage itself. Daniel's jaw clenched. Mara continued, we have multiple therapy records indicating Mrs. Montgomery expressed fear, emotional exhaustion, and feelings of invisibility long before leaving the marital home. Her eyes hardened as she glanced toward Daniel. Furthermore, the timing of the leaked footage raises concerns that someone close to Mr. Montgomery attempted to manipulate public perception for strategic gain. The judge's eyebrow raised. Even Daniel shifted. Then Mara gently touched Jody's arm. Mrs. Montgomery, would you like to speak for yourself? My heart stopped. Jody looked terrified. But then her eyes found mine. And in that split second, something changed. Her shoulders straightened. Her breath steadied. She stood. And she spoke. Your Honor, I have been called unstable for so long that I started believing it. But I'm not. Her voice trembled, but her spine stayed straight. I wasn't broken until I was living a life that didn't belong to me. A marriage that suffocated me. A home where my feelings never mattered unless they benefited someone else. Daniel stiffened. She continued, stronger. I left because I wanted to protect my baby. I needed to be somewhere I could breathe. Somewhere I could think. Somewhere I could be myself without fear. Her voice cracked once, just once. I am not unstable. I am healing. She took a breath. A deep one. And yes, I'm living with Emma. And no, that does not make me a danger to my child. She is the only person who has protected me without condition, without judgment, without control. The courtroom fell so silent I could hear my heartbeat. If you want proof that I'm thinking clearly, Jody said softly, then look at the fact that I'm choosing my baby's future over my past. I'm choosing honesty over appearances. And I'm choosing myself, maybe for the first time in my life. She sat slowly. The judge watched her for a long moment. Then he spoke. Mr. Montgomery, unless you have evidence of physical danger or medical negligence, the court will not remove a pregnant woman's autonomy. Daniel paled. The judge continued, firmer. Your request for emergency authority is denied. Jody's breath left her in a shaky rush. I felt tears sting my eyes. Mara exhaled quietly, victorious. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, Mrs. Montgomery is permitted to continue residing wherever she feels safe. Emotional support, especially during pregnancy, is vital. Daniel stood abruptly. Your Honor, sit down, the judge ordered, voice slicing. Daniel sat, trembling with barely suppressed rage. The judge adjourned. It was over. But the moment we stepped outside the courtroom, Daniel was there, waiting. His mask finally cracked. You ruined everything, he whispered to Jody, voice low and venomous. No, she said quietly, stepping back as he advanced. I saved myself. You think she'll stay? He hissed, jerking his chin toward me. You think she wants a broken wife carrying another man's child? I stepped between them before Jody could break under the cruelty. Say one more word, I said softly, and I swear, Emma, Jody whispered. Not fearful.
Certain.
I turned to her. Her eyes were steady.
Clear. Bright.
She took my hands, right there in the hallway, right in front of the man who had tried to destroy her. He's wrong, she whispered. I'm not broken. You never were, I said. He just convinced you to hide the parts he couldn't control. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't the frightened tears of the past. They were the tears of someone finally stepping into her own life. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her hand to my cheek. Emma, I want a life with you. My breath hitched. Are you sure? For the first time in my life, she whispered, I'm sure of everything. Daniel looked away. For the first time, he knew he had lost.
Completely.
Entirely.
Permanently.
Jody leaned closer. Her forehead touched mine. I choose you, she said. I choose us. I choose this baby, having a mother who is finally free. And then she kissed me. Not trembling. Not uncertain. Not stolen. But chosen.
Claimed.
A kiss that closed a door on one life and opened every window into the next. When she pulled back, she rested her hand on her stomach and whispered, Let's go home. And for the first time, it really felt like we had won. The delivery room smelled like antiseptic and humming machines and the sharp, metallic scent of fear. My fear, not hers. Jody was the calmest person there, despite the sweat on her forehead and the tremor in her voice every time another contraction took her breath away. She squeezed my hand so tightly, I thought my bones might fuse together, but I didn't let go for even a second. If she shattered every bone in my fingers, I would have thanked her for the privilege. Emma, she whispered through clenched teeth as another wave hit, you're breathing too fast. I let out a shaky laugh I didn't feel. You're literally having a baby. Maybe you should focus on your breathing instead of mine. She managed a tired smile. I focus on you so I don't panic. My heart throbbed painfully. Even now, even here, even while her body fought to bring a new life into the world, she trusted me to anchor her. Months had passed since the trial. Months of appointments and ultrasounds and nights spent lying in bed with her head on my chest, her hand resting protectively over the steady rhythm beneath her skin. Months of Jody finding herself piece by piece, buying maternity clothes she liked instead of ones that looked appropriate, painting the nursery with colors that made her happy, showing up to therapy and learning that choosing her happiness wasn't selfish, but survival. And months of us quietly becoming a family before we ever said the word out loud. The doctor checked her again. 10 centimeters, she announced. It's time. My breath caught. Jody's fingers tightened painfully around mine. She looked up at me, not panicked, but vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. Emma, she whispered, don't let go. Never. I breathed, brushing my forehead against hers. Not for anything. The next contraction tore through her, and she gasped, her body curling inward. The doctor's voice was calm, steady, practiced. Okay, Jody. Deep breath. You're doing beautifully. When the next contraction hits, push. The words hit her harder than the pain. She turned to me, eyes wide, terrified for the first time. What if I can't do this? You already are, I said softly. Every breath, every second, every step that led you here, you've been doing this on your own strength. I'm just here to hold your hand. Tears filled her eyes. I want her to come into the world seeing your face. My chest broke open. The contraction came before I could recover, and she screamed, raw, primal, the kind of sound that pulled tears straight from my eyes. She pushed, gripping my hand with everything she had. Her face went pale, sweat running down her temples. Jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might shatter. You're doing so well, I whispered over and over. I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. Minutes blurred. Hours, maybe. Time meant nothing except the next push, the next breath, the next moment. Jody leaned into me like she needed my strength because she'd run out of her own. One more, the doctor finally said. She's crowning. One more, Jody. You're so close. Jody's entire body shook. Exhaustion rippled through her in waves. Emma, she sobbed. I can't. I cupped her face with both hands, forcing her eyes to meet mine. You can, I whispered fiercely. You survived a marriage that tried to erase you. You fought for your freedom. You built a new life from ashes. You rebuilt yourself. You can do this. You were born to do this. She breathed once, deep, steadying. Then she pushed, screaming my name through the pain. And then silence. A fraction of a second where the universe held its breath. And then the room filled with crying. Tiny.
Piercing. Perfect.
Jody collapsed back onto the bed with a broken sob of relief. I looked toward the doctor as she lifted a small, slippery, impossibly fragile human into the world. Healthy baby girl, she announced. My eyes burned instantly. Jody covered her mouth with a shaking hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emma, she whispered, unable to look away from the tiny body being cleaned and wrapped. She's here. Yeah, I breathed, choking back a sob. She's here. The nurse brought the baby over, bundled tightly in a warm blanket, her cries softer now, her face scrunched and pink, her tiny fists waving indignantly at the world that had dared to be bright and cold and loud. Jody reached out and took her with trembling arms. The moment their skin touched, something inside me cracked open. Jody stared down at her daughter, her eyes wide, her breath uneven, her entire face melting into awe and disbelief. Hi, she whispered shakily, brushing the baby's cheek with her finger. Oh my God. Hi. The baby blinked up at her, still frowning from the injustice of being born, and my throat tightened so hard I had to cover my mouth to keep from sobbing. Jody looked up at me then, really looked, and her eyes were overflowing with something so pure and overwhelming it almost hurt. Emma, she whispered, come here. I moved to her side, barely breathing. She shifted the tiny bundle slightly, offering her to me. Hold her. Jody, I whispered, trembling. Are you sure? She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. You've held me together for months. You deserve to hold the part of me you saved. My chest cracked open. I took the baby into my arms, carefully, terrified, reverently. She was warm, so warm, and impossibly small. Her face relaxed slightly as she settled against me, her cries fading into soft whimpers. I looked down at her, this tiny human who would grow up knowing her mother had fought the world to bring her into safety, and who, if I was lucky, would grow up knowing I loved her too. Hi, little one, I whispered. Welcome home. Jody watched me with a trembling smile. Emma? Yeah. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For choosing me when I couldn't choose myself. For loving me before I could love you back. For staying. I leaned closer, tears finally falling freely. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered. Not today. Not ever. She reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together over the baby's blanket. We're a family, she said softly, voice breaking. We really are. I looked down at the baby, her tiny chest rising and falling, her fingers curling instinctively around the edge of my shirt. And for the first time, the future didn't scare me. It felt possible. Tender.
Bright.
I kissed the top of the baby's head. Then I leaned in and kissed Jody, slow, soft, full of everything we had fought through to get here. When we parted, she whispered, "Welcome to the world, little girl. You're already so loved." And as the morning sun rose through the hospital window, touching all three of us with its gentle warmth, I realized something simple and life-changing. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.